When I opened the door, 2 police officers were standing on my porch, and right behind them, the HOA president, arms crossed, smirking like she just caught a criminal. She told them I was illegally renting out a cabin in her neighborhood, ... What she didn't know, I wasn't just renting it. I owned the entire project. And by the time I was done showing the paperwork, she was the one in trouble. I'm the project's owner. Let me back up for a second. I'm not just some guy who showed up in the woods trying to Airbnb a shack. I'm a real estate investor. I spent the last 14 months working on a private mountain retreat, 7 cabins, high-end finishes, full permits, everything legit. This specific cabin, it was the first one finished. Quiet, lakefront, surrounded by pines. It was perfect. I bought the land fair and square, not part of any HOA. It's technically outside their boundaries. But that didn't stop her, Karen, the self-declared queen of the neighborhood, from trying to run it all like her own little kingdom. The moment she saw construction happening, she started showing up first. It was passive-aggressive questions. Do you have permission to build here? Then it turned into complaints, letters, threats. Even walking onto the property to inspect things, like she had any authority. I kept it cool, always professional, always polite. I thought maybe if I ignored her, she'd get bored and move on. I was wrong, because that Saturday morning, she escalated it in the worst way possible. She called the cops on me, told them I was trespassing on community land and operating an illegal rental. And here's the craziest part, the cops actually showed up, with flashing lights, asking questions, standing in my driveway like I was the problem. That's when I knew this wasn't just HOA drama anymore. It was war. So there I was, standing on the porch of my own cabin, with 2 officers asking me questions like I was some random trespasser. Karen stood behind them, arms folded, nodding like she'd finally won. You could tell she was enjoying every second of it. One of the officers asked, "Sir, are you the owner of this property?" And before I could even open my mouth, she jumped in with, "No, officer, this is an unapproved short-term rental. It violates the HOA rules. I.V. already filed a complaint." I calmly told them I had the paperwork and went inside to grab it. But I couldn't help but notice Karen trying to look inside while I was gone, like she expected to catch something illegal happening, like I was harboring fugitives or building a nightclub. When I came back with the deed, the permits, the project plan, everything, I handed it over without saying a word. I let the documents speak for themselves. That's when I noticed a shift. One of the officers raised his eyebrows. The other flipped the page and glanced back at Karen. I could tell they were starting to realize something didn't add up. But here's the thing, this wasn't the first time Karen had pulled something like this. A week earlier, one of my guests told me a woman came by and claimed she was with community enforcement, tried to take photos of the license plate, said the guest was breaking laws by staying there. I brushed it off as a scare tactic. Then I got a letter slipped under the door, typed in all caps, saying I had 10 days to remove all illegal rental signs or face legal action. Problem is, I never put up any signs. She made that up too. Neighbors warned me about her. Said she once tried to find someone for having patio string lights after 9 p.m. Another guy got written up for having too many plants. This wasn't just an overstep, this was her obsession. And now she had involved the police on my property with my name on the deed. At this point, I wasn't even angry. I was just stunned. The audacity, the entitlement. She thought she could bully people into submission, and she truly believed She had the power to evict me from a cabin I designed, funded, and legally owned. But she made one huge mistake. She picked a fight with the wrong person. So I'm standing there, officers flipping through my documents, and Karen's fidgeting now. That smug smirk is gone. She leans in and says, "This is HOA territory. I don't care what papers he has. We control all rentals here." The younger officer turns to her and says, "Ma'am, according to this map, his property falls outside of your HOA jurisdiction." You could hear a pin drop, and then I said the line that really hit her. Not only do I own this cabin, I own the entire ridge. The roads, the land, every lot in this phase. I'm the lead developer of this entire project. Her eyes went wide. She actually stumbled back a step. You could see it hit her all at once. She had no authority here, not a single ounce. She'd called the cops on the owner of the land she was trying to control. The officers looked at each other. One of them handed me back my paperwork and said, "Looks like everything's in order, sir. Sorry to bother you." Karen, of course, tried to save face. She started mumbling about zoning codes and neighborhood values. But at that point, it was over. "Now I gotta ask you this. What would you do if someone called the cops on your property one? You had the deed in your hand. Let me know down in the comments." And just when I thought that was the end of it, Karen made it worse. Way worse. After the cops apologized and walked back to their car, Karen didn't leave. Nope, she stood there, mouth twitching, still trying to argue. "This entire area falls under HOA Code 13B, she said, as if quoting some neighborhood law book gave her authority. I calmly looked at her and said, "Karen, there is number 13B. You just made that up. And here's where it gets even wilder." About 30 minutes later, I get an email. It's from the HOA board, well, more like Karen pretending to speak on behalf of the board. It was this formal-sounding notice claiming I was in breach of community harmony standards. Harmony, are you serious? So I decided to make it official. I forwarded the email to my legal team and requested a meeting with the actual HOA board members, not just Karen. Turns out most of them had no idea what she'd been doing. When I showed up at the emergency HOA meeting the next day, the look on their faces said everything. Karen had been throwing her weight around, misrepresenting the board, and even altering maps to make it look like my development fell under HOA control. I brought the original plat map, the county records, and a copy of the HOA charter, all showing clear boundaries that ended a full block before my property line. I laid it all out on the table. I said, "This isn't just about a cabin. This is about your HOA president misusing authority, involving law enforcement, and lying to your faces." One board member turned to Karen and asked, "Is this true?" She didn't answer. She just looked down, arms crossed, like a student who got caught cheating on a test. They didn't say anything right away, but I could tell she was losing them. And then, right there in front of everyone, I dropped the bomb. I said, "I'm currently in talks with the county to build 3 more cabins, and legally, there's nothing this HOA can do about it. In fact, I'm going to be paving and maintaining the private road you all use to access the lake." You could have heard her teeth grinding from across the room. After I laid everything out in that meeting, deeds, maps, county permits, and emails, there wasn't much left for Karen to stand on. The board sat in awkward silence, some of them flipping through the documents, others just shaking their heads. Karen, she was dead silent, biting the inside of her cheek, refusing to make eye contact. Then, one of the board members, a guy named Frank, spoke up. He said, "Karen, none of this was ever brought to a vote. You didn't consult us about calling the police. You didn't even tell us about these supposed rental violations. Another member chimed in. This could have been a lawsuit. You put the entire HOA at risk. That's when I knew I wasn't just winning. I had flipped the narrative. Now she was the problem. I took the opportunity to go one step further. I told them I'd be filing a formal complaint with the county and, if necessary, a civil suit against the HOA for harassment and false reporting. But then I softened the blow. That's not my goal, I said. I don't want conflict. I want clarity. And I want to make sure no one else has to deal with this kind of abuse of power. Frank nodded and said, "We agree. This is not what the HOA is supposed to be about." And just like that, Karen was isolated. Her board allies went silent. Her reputation wrecked. A few days later, I got an official email from the HOA, not Karen, acknowledging the misunderstanding, stating that my property falls outside their governance and that I'm free to operate as I see fit. No apology, no ownership, just damage control. But the funniest part, 2 board members privately reached out to me afterward. They asked if they could invest in the project. One even joked, "If you ever want to run for HOA president, you've got my vote." Laughed. I told him I already own more land than all of you combined. I don't need a title to have control. And as for Karen, I haven't seen her near my cabin since. No more emails, no more threats, just silence. Now that the HOA had officially backed off, I didn't waste a second. I submitted plans for 3 more cabins, all within my development zone, all completely outside of HOA reach. I also contracted a crew to pave and expand the private road. Yes, my road, the same one Karen used to patrol like it was her kingdom. But here's the real power move. I put up a brand new custom sign at the entrance of the property line. It read, "Private development, no HOA jurisdiction beyond this point, and let me tell you, the day that sign went up, it was like someone sucked the air out of the entire HOA board's group chat. Not a peep, not a whisper. I could only imagine Karen reading it from her car, gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. But I wasn't done. Nope. I hosted a soft launch event at the cabin, invited some guests, neighbors, even county officials. Karen was not invited. People were blown away by the design, the tranquility, and ironically, the fact that there wasn't an HOA breathing down their necks. One guest said, "This is the first place I've stayed where I don't feel watched." I smiled and said, "Exactly the vibe I was going for." Oh, and just to really drive it home, I had the entire project rebranded under a new name. Why? Because freedom from HOA nonsense is exactly what I'm offering. And just in case Karen or anyone else ever gets the idea to try something again, I made sure a giant copy of my land deed is framed, laminated, and hanging right by the front door. So the next time someone comes knocking, they'll already know exactly who they're dealing with. Ownership isn't just about land. It's about knowing your rights and having the spine to protect them.